Hey there, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington. Here we talk all things cloud. And today we're going to be talking about SDKs. And we're not going to be talking really about using them, but the process of building them and that mentality that we think about them these days. I think there was a time where SDKs were something that we'd use. A project might have one if we're lucky, but there's many different languages these days. You know, you might have your favorite language, whether it's Python, .NET, Go, Ruby, whatever language you're using. The challenge is we're now in a world where we're building software which have turned into services. So surely that means those connectors, those SDKs and those APIs that we work on also need to be thought of in a similar way where they're services as well. So I'm delighted to be joined by a good friend, once again, developer Steve Kuchin, who joins us back a little while ago. It was actually before, wasn't it, Steve? When was the last time?
I had to remember this too because it felt like so long. It was last year.
It was November last year. Wow. We are almost a year to the day of your release. You know what? I'm going to see if I can schedule it in a way to be like a year apart. That'll be quite fun. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that sounds good. No, really good. The usual deploying things, breaking stuff. I mean, that's where the fun happens, right? When you
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's where we learn. It's where, as we were talking before going live, it's where we find content as well, right? So
it's true.
This is absolutely part of the fun.
It's always that question you ask yourself as a dev or as a tech person, going, I wonder if this thing can do this other thing, and then you try it, and it either works really well and becomes content, or fails miserably and still becomes content. So it's win-win.
or even the third scenario where you go deeper into the rabbit hole. It's like, oh, I could do this thing too.
Yeah,
and you keep iterating. No, it's good. So there's been a bit of change for you as well since we last spoke as well, which I think also helps with the context of this talk here.
I changed companies since we last talked. So I went from and shout out to good friends at Sneak. But I left Sneak and moved on to Lamingo, doing interesting and amazing things. Yeah, let's put those two together. Interesting and amazing things in the worlds of observability and open telemetry, which is
awesome.
been fun because I mean breaking stuff intentionally. It's always fun.
And it's such an important area as well, right? Because you think of the projects in the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, and some of the really hot ones I see keep coming up are around open telemetry. You know, it's a hard problem because we've got these distributed applications we're working on these days, these distributed services, trying to get a really good view of where in the haystack the needle is, and you know what is wrong with the needle as well. Is a really hard challenge to solve. So I really admire the work that's going on in that space, actually.
Yeah, I agree. And like the number of apps, I must have a gray hair for every time I've had this happen. But the number of apps I've deployed where, you get that alert. It's always going to be on like a midnight Friday night, like
of course,
halfway through a game of something, and you get that alert come up, and then you've got to try and trace it and work out where it is. And next minute, the sun's coming up.
Yay! No, exactly. It's always the wrong time. Always the wrong time. Agreed. So that's the context, I suppose, then of why we're kind of talking about this today as well. So SDKs as a service, I think, was one of the aspects of your talk. So maybe is that a good starting point for us?
No, it totally is. And
nice.
Yeah, this one has been near and dear to my heart for some time because, as is observability, of course, but being a dev and consuming APIs, any number of APIs in any manner of ways, like SDKs for me, sort of means that I don't have to rebuild wheels, so to speak, every time you need to do something. And
yes.
I've dealt with so many APIs in the past where I've had to rebuild wheels or backwards engineer because documentation. Please document, everyone. Please document. When you're pulling apart that API or that I'm going to say wrapper to be able to work out what things are doing, please document. On that note, Wait, let me switch over to my thing. Here's some slides I prepared earlier. But
Nice.
yeah, and I think that's the one thing like I've noticed over the years as a dev and as somebody that's worked close with product managers before, like there's a few things I think APIs always definitely need, which is provide a valid service. That one goes without saying. You want it to do something particular, add functionality to your app or to your users inside your app, etc. This one goes without saying. I could rant for days about that one. But anyway, I won't.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's been so many APIs I've used where you've got to try and reverse engineer what the API is. So yeah, we'll skip past that. I'm sure we've all been there.
Yep. So many times. Of course, multiple of integration options, maybe including SOAP. Oh no, maybe not. We'll debate that one. too soon. Too many memories.
Wow, we've got two hot topics there. We could spend a whole session on. we should keep going.
Flashback to certain payment providers, SOAP APIs. But anyway, we won't go there. Yeah. Of course, SDKs, which just like, and I've worked this one like on the front lines and also as a consumer of building out apps many times in the past. This one actually came about from a telecommunications company I was working with a number of years ago. They had a developer program and just newly launched API and no SDKs, or like 2 or 3 SDKs. And I was like, no, you can't do that. We need to make it easier to integrate, like you can make it faster, etc. So, which is actually where I found what I'm going to talk about a bit about today, which is the Open API generator community. Wait, I'm going to switch screens. There they go. This community is like amazing, and I started using it back in the Swagger 2 days when that was the latest and greatest thing. Now of course it's all Open API generator or Swagger 3. No, Open API. But what this does essentially is take an Open API spec or a Swagger 2, or I think it still supports Swagger 1, consumes it and then outputs a multiple of SDKs automatically from the spec, which is really cool because, well, it automates stuff. Which, like for me, like being able to push out those SDKs super quickly has always been great because, well, often you need to push them out really quickly, especially when you've got breaking changes.
No, I fully agree. Just everything that you're saying about SDKs and their importance. I indulge me for a minute. I embarked on one of those pet projects we were talking about earlier. You know, we start the rabbit hole, you go further down the rabbit hole. So I was making a GitHub action actually to parse an RSS feed, and then I wanted to have a second action which can kind of post to multiple different social media sites. Effectively, you know, new blog gets released, I get like an issue or PR, make some comments, it then gets scheduled. And there's a provider that I use, and I went through that exact same workflow, you know, looking at their docs, looking to try and understand what SDKs, and I couldn't find a single SDK. Now, that might be that their docs are not so great in pointing to where their SDKs are, or it might be the fact there is no SDK. But immediately in my mind, there's that kind of developer friction, that kind of resistance, which is like, I've got to go use REST APIs. That means I've got to go handle this and this thing and this thing. It's not impossible, you know, obviously it's all pretty basic code that we can write in terms of, you know, get this, pass this JSON or turn it into this object, blah, blah, blah. But it's those things that you have to do that you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
Get the bearer token or request a token, store it, and then check if it's valid still for other calls and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. All of that plumbing that you don't really want to do. I'm with you.
Actually, I like that, the way to describe that, all that plumbing.
Yeah. Because that's what it is effectively, isn't it? Like that's kind of how I describe, you know, whenever you're using your favorite CI/CD provider, you could always use a script, but then you have to deal with all the plumbing that comes with it. And I kind of see REST APIs versus SDKs almost being that same analogy. You know, you can do it that way. It's just there's the plumbing you have to deal with instead. So anyway, I digress.
But it's so much easier to get set up. The one thing I really like about this project, I mean, there's many things and we're going to talk about in this slide, is there's a local CLI, so you can brew install if you're on Mac or
Nice.
other operating systems supported. And this is where I first started using it because I was able to get the latest spec from Product Manager, be able to push out an SDK, and then, of course, the most important part of this entire piece, the testing and then observing it all. And just to reiterate, I actually have a story about this because one time, so for some context, I started with one product, one API product, so multiple APIs in that, pushing out some of the main language SDKs, dare I say PHP, Java, Ruby, etc. I said it.
There we go.
Everyone's going to rage now. Comments please, everyone leave comments if you enjoy PHP. But yeah, I started with the local CLI and just sort of building out some basic SDKs. This one time I didn't test them though because I didn't have time. And it started originally with one product and quickly moved on to many products. So I think in the end I was supporting like 45 SDKs across like 6 or 7 products. And so I was like, I don't have time, got to push it out, got to run to a thing. And all of a sudden we get all these emails in saying, hey, the SDK is not working. So, I mean, the glass half full of that aspect was people are using them. Yay.
Right.
And of course, the glass half empty was, oh shit, it's broken.
Yeah, it's, hey, you were before your time. You were testing in production. There you go.
Yeah. I like to live dangerously.
I think I might be slightly twisting some definitions there, so we'll move on from that. but it's a valid point, though, right? And it's kind of funny. Like, I'm sure there's many people who do the whole, I do testing, but we've all been there. We've all had that moment where we're like, oh, I've got too much to do. I just need to get that out. So yeah, we'll just push it. I'm sure it'll be fine. Famous last words.
Especially when you don't know whether people are potentially using it, because I mean, if nothing's broken, no one complains. So until something breaks, and then everyone.
Yeah, and actually, that comment has really kind of opened my eyes. Actually, I guess to part of this talk and where you're going with this is, would you have made that same decision had you had the observability to know that people were using it? And it's a good chicken and egg problem. Cool.
Well, as part of this, I know we're running out of time. You can also make it a deployable service, so it's containerized. You can deploy it to a container and be able to build some stuff out from that. Which I have a fun diagram to talk around now, and how you can test it as well. Of course, Swagger support, we've already talked about that. Now, this is all the languages that actually support at the moment, which is crazy. And shout out to the community behind this too, because they have the core team, the openapi generator team, and the core team that kind of manage the main code base. And then every single one of these SDKs or server stubs, or API clients as they call them, has their own sub-community underneath that as well. So there's essentially 50 plus communities on top of the main community. So if you are using this in production, please contribute back. Just even give them a star, because they do so much really cool work in keeping this updated and everything nice and happy. Most important thing with this too is you can customize the SDK templates. And I think I've seen the likes of Square do that with some of their SDKs they push out. They're just moustache templates, so you can make them a bit prettier from the default, let's say, because the default output, I mean, they'll work. They may not be the nicest looking SDKs and stuff, so documentation that go with it. So
gotcha.
Anyway, you can customize as well, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Observing it, you can, and this is where I started to use some of my new observability powers with auto tracing and open telemetry, etc. So deploying to a containerized service, for example, the actual base SDK generator, you're able to get some really nice metrics out of that and be able to see, how much memory is being consumed, how much resources are being consumed as part of the container. And then even down to different tasks running inside the stack, so to speak.
And this is really cool because this generator, which is generic in terms of any API you could pull in, that ability to then be able to, well, effectively bring in some telemetry automatically as part of that generation process as well, and identifying that is really powerful, like so powerful, to a standard as well, right? Where you've got with open telemetry and those metrics, because you then have many options that you could integrate with in terms of tools as well. So this is awesome.
Well, the other part to this too is you can, and I love automation. I mean, it means I can go and do like the more fun things. Yeah,
yep.
Well, you can containerize the actual app and then have the Swagger spec come out of an API, it's out of the API infrastructure, push over to the container, generate some SDKs, which you then can deploy and test inside a serverless environment. So, and then like rinse and repeat, tweak that as you need to as well. Here's something I prepared earlier. Now we're going full circle. So yeah, nice. You can take the SDK straight out and load it against some basic test scripts, and then be able to test how much memory, how much runtime, even some nice end-to-end tracing to see any other consumable services, how they play nice with the base SDK as well.
Yeah, because that's an interesting comment, because there's only so far you're going to be able to go with, like, your SAST tools, for example. You've got to be able to have that smoke test, that environment where you can pull in that SDK, actually call things and double check, as a call stack broken somewhere. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, well, the one thing I used to find when I was doing, dare I say it, manual testing, was the Python. I actually get cold sweats whenever I think back to that, because I was doing that with 40 something of them. And anyway, long story. That testing to make sure that those SDKs work. The one I used to always go for first was Python, because of its strict approach to coding. Usually, if that one passed, the rest of them would generally pass fairly well, or at least not throw any errors.
Interesting.
But on the here's another one I prepared earlier, and this is where, like, end-to-end. This is just our on the Lamigo sandbox. Sure. One of the things I love with the end-to-end tracing is, I'm just going to grab one of these. It actually maps individual transactions and invocations straight through from the original source, and maps it through to every component that it runs through there on in. So you get a really nice map to be able to see there's that error there. And like instances like this, it actually, the error may not be happening in that one component. Like you said at the start, it could be happening further back up the line. It's just, this is the first place this is surfacing at.
No, this is cool.
Needles and haystacks.
Yeah, and I always use that analogy because it just works so well, right? Like, that is what microservices is in that sense. You've got many different haystacks. Where on earth is the needle? Where on earth is the problem? And it's a challenge. And yeah, I love this UI and the output you get.
Should I make it bigger? And just to look at some of the ECS, there we go. Which should we go for? Let's go with that one. So you can actually map straight through, and like, I've used this for so many things, just to get that window into the stack without having to dig through all the logs to actually find it. That particular one thing, and we've all been there, like having to go through and do a tail on a server just to find that one particular log, or dig through those UIs to find a thing, or write the right query, etc. But so yeah, this is actually good.
Relation then to, I guess we were talking about the SDKs a moment ago, and this is the observability side. So in this sandbox environment, has I guess the SDKs have been instrumented, that's the word I'm looking for, with the needed pieces then to send telemetry to Lamigo. Is that kind of what we're looking through? I guess.
This is using open telemetry and auto tracing to basically pick up all the invocations through through the cloud, essentially. So
Nice.
instead of, and like one of my favorite things with this, and I've totally been here before too, is no agent. This is all agentless.
Yes.
So you don't
Yes.
need to set up anything on the stack. You don't need to, integrate any particular thing into your app. You can do that to get even like more data in, but you don't need to on the initial onset with containers and serverless.
With you. Understood.
Which is really cool, because like the amount of times you set up that agent, the APM to run, and then a few days later you have to go back and check it because it's actually erroring, and you need to look at those logs or get another agent to monitor the agent. No, rabbit holes.
But it's the beauty of this then, right? Is it's not necessarily a one or the other. Like you could use with your favorite cloud provider that agentless approach, but then if there are SDKs that you're using that have that built-in telemetry capability as well, and they're using that same format because of something like openapi generator, and you've got that standardized approach, suddenly you've got this visibility across all these different layers of the stack, which is super powerful.
Yeah. When you what was that?
That was Siri. That was Siri on my watch deciding to get involved in the discussion. We'll skip past Siri. You're not involved today.
It's a little bit too much observability.
And again, go away. There we go. I apologize.
That's fine. And like we were talking about earlier, when you run into the proverbial Friday night rule, as I say, like this helps you get back to your gaming as quick as you possibly can.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh, good. So then, I guess where do we go from here? I guess we've seen the importance of having SDKs over and above APIs and treating them as a service. Take a look at openapi generator, and then also talk through that importance of having testing and observability and monitoring as part of that as well. So where do we go from here, Steve?
I want to do another shout out to this amazing community. Please contribute, even if it's just go and do a star on their repo, because they're amazing. So worth checking out. Sign up so from here, Lamigo is free to use. So if you do want to test this amazing community and their containerized SDK generator, hook it up to free tier Lamigo as well, and see the metrics, see what it does. Check your existing stuff as well. And again, please contribute back to the amazing work these folks do. I don't know why I'm pointing up. I should be pointing sideways.
but you're spot on, though. I think there's often a lot of consumption of open source tooling, not often as much as contributing back as we'd like to see, I think. We being the proverbial, we as developers in the community. I think it's something on all of us to do what we can to support back. So I'll be for sure taking a look at the openapi generator repo and starring them and sharing love with them as well. So no, this is cool. Thank you for flagging.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, this one, like I've used it extensively. Actually, I have contributed back to this to some of the work they do too, where I can. Always nice. Every little bit helps.
Exactly. This is it, right? This is the idea behind open source. It's that community coming together, all for the greater good to build something better. So awesome. So I guess then call to action is pretty clear. Couple of things there. openapi generator. Take a check of that. Have a look at the repo. Support that community. Share some love with the community. And also then as well, Lumigo. Checking that out, using the containerized option I think you mentioned, and looking at some of the metrics that come out from there too. Super. No, really good whistle-stop tour for us there, developer Steve. Any kind of closing words of wisdom that you want to leave folks with here?
I was trying to think of actually, I do have a developer joke or a tech joke if you want one.
Sweet, let's do it.
How do fallen trees check for errors?
I feel I'm gonna kick myself after this. Go on.
Log files.
Oh, I was just about to say, I just got it just before you said it. I was like, oh dear.
Yep. Yep.
On that note, thank you very much for joining again, sir. It's been a pleasure catching up. Really great session. I think an interesting one. I think a lot of people are always thinking about building and testing in terms of the services that they're consuming, not necessarily the SDKs that they're building as well. So, really interesting angle to think about some of those concepts we know and how we can bring them back into that friendly world as well. So, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for having me on again. Always love having a chat.
Thank you. Speak soon. So there we go, folks. We have been talking all about SDKs, how we go from APIs to SDKs, how there are tools like the openapi generator to help us with that process, but also that a lot of those processes we're familiar with in terms of building, in terms of testing, in terms of observability as well, how we can apply those same principles to our SDKs, because after all, we can treat them like services. They are services in a way that people are using for our applications, for their applications. They're building upon our work to go and do that, to go and achieve that. So really important to bring those same principles in there. So check out the openapi generator, check out Lumigo, and of course, folks, share some love with the open source community as well. So with that, thank you for joining once again. Stay tuned for the next one. And then until then, bye for now.